The UN's climate panel issues a code red for humanity. The Tokyo Olympics are in the books, and the U.S. coming out on top in the gold medal count thanks to the women. Monday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Monday, August 9th. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Good morning, Carlo.
Morning, Wags. How was your long weekend? How you feeling?
It was okay. It was long. A lot of stuff with my daughter, but the weekend itself was good, and it's good to be back.
Good to have you back.
All right, let's get to the news here. Some breaking news this morning. The UN climate report that you guys mentioned on Friday has just been released. And it's pretty dire stuff. No way to sugarcoat it here. The Earth's climate is probably going to blow past the level of warming that scientists had hoped to prevent sometime in the 2030s, according to this landmark climate report from the UN. Now, the report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was based on 14,000 scientific studies. It was approved by 195 countries, and it found that 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming is already locked in. Even if the world's top polluters started to drastically cut emissions right now. Just FYI, 1.5 degrees Celsius is about 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so just that's a little context. The planet has already warmed 1.1 degrees Celsius in the last century and a half, and the report says humanity can still prevent the worst case scenarios if countries stopped adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere by 2050. At that point, global warming would level off at about 1.5 degrees Celsius. Again, that's about 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. But it was pretty depressing to read the story this morning, I gotta say.
Yeah, nothing like a good climate report on a Monday morning. So yeah, if we fail to hit that, if we fail to keep it to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which as you said is now basically baked in, this report talks about how temperatures are going to keep rising, right? 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees Celsius. This report is different from past reports in that it details what happens at each of those levels, right? Basically, it's saying that once you get past 1.5 degrees Celsius, you start reaching these tipping points that people can't really predict. We don't really know what that means. What happens when the coral reefs start dying off? What happens when the ice sheets start breaking off? It also leaves no doubt that humans are responsible for basically all of the rise in temperatures since the 19th century and the Industrial Revolution, starting with the burning of fossil fuels, which we already knew, but of course it helps to have a panel like this telling us that again. It also concluded that the last decade was probably the hottest the planet has been in the last 125,000 years. The carbon dioxide levels haven't been this high in 2 million years. And I have only read the summary yet because, as you just mentioned, Jill, this only came across the transom here within the last hour. So I want to dive into it a little more today. But this report is going to be the focus when the UN convenes in Glasgow in November for COP26, which is its big, I think they do it every couple of years, their big climate summit.
Yeah, I mean, look, we know that there are certain parts of the world that are a little bit better protected from the effects of climate change than others. But one of the experts who wrote it said, I don't see any area that is safe. There is nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Some of the stuff that we can expect, the kind of heat wave that used to happen once every 50 years, now would likely happen once in a decade, for example, or twice in every 7 years. And the world, they're saying, is locked in to about 15 to 30 centimeters or 6 to 12 inches of sea level rise by mid-century. So that's not that far off here, right? We're talking about 20, 30 years. And it's funny, I was driving all the way up north on Long Island yesterday, and I was just looking to my left, and I went all the way up to the North Shore, and the water's right there already. I mean, we get flooding. It was rain. It was pretty much a downpour yesterday here on Long Island anyway, and the roads were already flooded. I mean, so basically it's baked in, right? Like 6 to 12 inches that the sea levels are going to rise by a foot. Think about what that does to hurricanes, to cyclones, to any kind of severe weather. It just makes it that much more extreme.
Well, and also I don't know what the statistic is, but, obviously, needless to say, a lot of people live on the coastlines in the world, right? That's sort of how humanity started, building cities, right? They built them on the coast. So yeah, I want to dig in a little more today because I think that there's probably going to be some stuff in here that maybe will make us feel a little more hopeful. But needless to say, this is a code red for humanity, as the scientists themselves are putting it.
All right, these strange 2020 Tokyo Olympics are in the books, and the 2024 Paris Games are now just 1,088 days away. The Games ended pretty much as they started, inside a nearly empty stadium that served as a reminder of the pandemic raging outside. Still, these Olympics can be considered a success, if for no other reason that it did not appear to serve as a super spreader event. The head of the IOC thanked the people of Japan, exclaiming, "We did it together," to scattered applause.
You couldn't really hear the applause, obviously, because there was nobody there. If your Olympic fever, by the way, is still going strong, you don't actually have to wait till Paris because of how messed up everything is. The Beijing Winter Games are now less than 6 months away, if you can believe it. But yeah, I mean, I watched a little bit of the closing ceremony last night. I guess it's sort of funny, right? It feels like every 4 years. This year was obviously different, but it's like every time there's an Olympics, we kind of are like, oh, this Olympics is going to be a disaster. It's going to be a mess for XYZ reason, right? They didn't build the stadiums in time. The country's in bankruptcy. In this case, a raging pandemic. And they always kind of turn out okay. And I guess this is another example of that, right? They were okay.
And for the 7th Olympics in a row, Team USA came out on top in the medal count with 39 golds to China's 38. And 118 overall. U.S. women dominated the medal podium this year, bringing home 66 in total, or 58.4% of the total haul. And this includes golds in track, cycling, basketball, and indoor volleyball on the last day of the competition.
Yeah, thank you to the women because they got us. They got us ahead of China in the gold count. Team USA's biggest disappointment, which we talked about last week, the men's track team, which, think about this, leaving Tokyo without a single solo gold for the first time in modern Olympics history. They won gold in the 4x400 meter relay, so that saved some face. But still, no individual running golds for Americans men's track. That is really remarkable. And just in terms of, I guess, favorite moments, I think obviously Simone Biles, that whole narrative was pretty cool to see her. I really liked the weightlifter. I'm going to mess her name up. Hidillian Diaz from the Philippines. She spent months stuck in Malaysia because of the pandemic. She had to build her own gym. She worked on weights that she made out of bamboo sticks and jugs of water. And she was the first athlete to win a gold medal for her country, the Philippines, which is incredible. There's the high jumpers, Mutaz Barshim of Qatar, Gianmarco Tamberi of Italy. These were the guys who chose to forego a jump off that would have decided the competition, and they ended up sharing the Olympic gold instead. That was really cool. Those are just sort of some of the stories of the. I thought so. You didn't think?
I don't know. I don't know much of the backstory. I guess that's cool. I feel like, though, wouldn't you want to go for the gold? I don't know. Yeah, I'm saying it, and I actually don't know a lot. I think that they're friends, right? I don't know much about the backstory. So
well, I just liked it because I think that it just showed sort of like the resilience and the grit. And Baker and I were talking about this on the live chat on Friday a little bit. But just there's no love lost anywhere for the IOC, I don't think. But these athletes came to play, and they did, right? They really did, and they showed a lot of resilience and a lot of grit everywhere from Simone Biles to these two who shared the gold in the high jump, and there were a lot of those stories, and that's what makes the Olympics cool, and that's why we keep watching.
I thought it was a success, and I'm glad that they did it. I was excited for the Olympics. I think it was one of those things, like you said, you never know the storylines that are going to emerge. I loved getting to know some of the younger Team USA gymnastics stars that for the first time, because so much attention had been on Simone Biles, who is great, by the way, and she's not ruling out that she's going to compete in the next Olympics. She said, we'll see. There potentially could be more Simone Biles in the years ahead. But I thought it was cool just to get to know some of these younger athletes. It was largely seen as a win for some of these newer sports as well. Like the skateboarding and the surfing, it definitely attracting a younger audience. So, all right, let's talk a little COVID right now. U.S. COVID deaths back above 500 a day for the first time in months as the Delta wave showing no signs of peaking yet. Pediatric hospitals in Florida are reporting shortages of ICU beds. Public officials in Austin, Texas, activated the city's emergency alert system over the weekend to warn that the situation there has turned dire. There were just 6 ICU beds available in Austin. That is a city of 2.4 million people. So we're at about 100,000 COVID cases a day now here in the United States, at least the ones that we're testing for, because as we know, testing is way dramatically down.
Yeah, I'm sure it's like who even knows how many actual cases there are. But if you look at the map, the Southeast, which is really basically Louisiana to Florida, that whole sort of the Gulf Coast, that's now bright red. It looks like any of the worst of the waves that we saw in the pre-vaccine days of last spring, last winter. It's just really incredibly depressing because it didn't have to be that way. Dr. Fauci over the weekend saying that he's hopeful that the FDA is going to grant full approval to at least one of the vaccines, probably Pfizer, by the end of this month, which he expects and is almost certainly will then spur a wave of vaccine mandates at businesses and schools, just as kids are starting to get back into the classroom, or at colleges at least, right?
Look, Florida schools, for the most part, start tomorrow. And there's still a lot of controversy about masks.
Yep.
A lot of schools want to do masks, but the governor has said they're not allowed. And I briefly mentioned it in the top, but COVID infections are climbing in kids right now, many of whom are, especially the ones that are too young to get vaccinated. NBC News spoke to this one hospital in Louisiana. This doctor said that they're seeing kids in the ICU ranging from 3 weeks old to 17 years old. They've treated about 25 or 26 patients in a space designed for just 20. So it doesn't sound like a lot, 25, 26 kids in Louisiana, but think about that. Their hospital isn't even designed to handle that many kids at one time. And when you think about kids, I mean, they don't totally understand what's going on. If you're so sick that you need to be in the hospital, that means you probably can't breathe. And it's horrible. And a lot of the doctors that NBC spoke to said mostly what they're seeing is that children are infected because a member of their household, usually a parent, brings the virus home. And usually it's because that adult is not vaccinated.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you don't want to do it for you, and you don't care about your grandparent, your parent, you don't want to do it for your kid?
Yeah. I mean, I think masks in schools now, sadly, are going to have to be a thing, right? They're just going to have to be. I don't know how else you put 30 people in a, little classroom at this point for hours at a day, even if they're at relative low risk, relative to adults at least. I just don't know how you do that without making them wear masks, which is a shame. It's a shame that we have to do that again, but I don't see another way.
If you were hoping that this fall is going to be back to normal, pretty clearly not the case. So New Orleans' famous Jazz Fest has been canceled again. So it's not going to take. It's now going to take place next spring. The event was called off last year. Then it was bumped to the fall of this year. Now it's going to just go back to its normal spring slot in 2022, having now missed 2 years in a row. Louisiana is the 5th least vaccinated state, and it's currently leading the country when it comes to new COVID cases.
Yeah, Jazz Fest. I've never been to Jazz Fest. I've always heard that it's like such a blast. And
I
it's
was supposed to go in 2020, actually.
Really?
For one of my friend's birthdays, a bunch of us were going to go, and obviously not to be.
Maybe next year, although who knows, right? It's just the thing with these events, the cultural events, like think about all the bands and the restaurants and the hotels and the vendors. They have to go another year without this source of income. These cultural events that have been canceled, and it really bums me out because, again, this was all avoidable. And I understand why everything had to be canceled last year. Obviously, there were no vaccines. We couldn't get things like Jazz Fest happening in the depths of pandemic, but we have the vaccines now. This shouldn't be the case. These things should not have to be canceled for the second year running. These are the things that make life worth living, right? I mean, not necessarily Jazz Fest, but these events where people get together and they listen to music and they eat good food. Like, this is what it's all about. To say nothing of the economic benefit for the city that they that hosts them, and like I said, the vendors and everybody who come in for these events. It's just so sad.
And one note about that, Carlo, as things get canceled for a second year and potentially even a third year, it's like, at what point are we just not going to do it anymore? You know, or at what point do just behaviors change so much that we're just not going to do it? And you have to wonder, right, are things going to just come roaring back, right? Like, once the Delta variant's gone and the pandemic's under control, are people going to go back to the movies or go back to these huge events and do this type of thing? Or is it just now too much time has passed that, like, we don't do that stuff anymore? I don't know.
That's a really thoughtful point. I hadn't even really thought about that, but you're right, because you're right. 1 year, maybe 2 years, you sort of like, it feels like a little pause in your life, but it's starting to feel more than that now. It's starting to now just feel like this is what life is now, and that's a really depressing thought for a Monday.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm back. I feel like you guys had 2 great days with, like, Mr. Optimist Baker Machado.
I know, that's all right.
Okay, overseas, Afghanistan now firmly in the process of falling to the Taliban after the militant group seized a handful of northern provincial capital cities over the weekend, including the strategic hub of Kunduz on Sunday. The U.S. military withdrawal is more or less complete, but American warplanes are still conducting airstrikes in support of the Afghan government. Those are set to end on August 31st on President Biden's orders.
Man, this is a gloomy pod today. Sorry, people. That's just the way the news cookie crumbles sometimes. Yeah, Afghanistan, man. In case there was any suggestion otherwise, the message here from the international community, including the United States, is basically, you guys are on your own. Good luck. They don't call it the graveyard of empires for nothing, do they? And I know nobody really cares anymore, and like, Afghanistan is yesterday's news, but this was a winnable war back in 2001, 2002, 2003. If we hadn't taken our eyes off the ball and go into Iraq, we would have gotten bin Laden. We probably would have dismantled the Taliban, and there would have been an international community at that point that would have tried to keep the peace. But now nobody wants anything to do with it.
Well, we would have gotten bin Laden earlier. We did get bin Laden eventually.
Yeah. Well, of course, yeah. But I'm saying we would have got him in Afghanistan.
I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah.
Okay, and finally, former President Barack Obama did celebrate his 60th birthday over the weekend at his estate in Martha's Vineyard. The enormous bash that was planned scaled back a bit over COVID concerns, but still included plenty of A-listers. Per playbook, John Legend sang happy birthday to Obama. Other guests included Beyonce and Jay-Z, CBS's Gayle King, Erykah Badu, Bradley Cooper, George Clooney, Questlove, and Tom Hanks. Guests received custom-designed face masks and cocktail napkins emblazoned with a 44 by 60 logo, Obama, of course, being the 44th president, and this being his big 6-0.
All of the guests at this bash were under a strict do not take photos policy, but sure enough, some photos leaked out, which they were then got by the Daily Mail and the New York Post, showing Obama dancing the night away. He looked like he was having a good time, and good for him. He's entitled to throw himself a nice birthday party with Tom Hanks, as we all are. I don't really get the controversy about COVID. I'm sure 100% of the people at that party were vaccinated. The issue isn't that Obama, it's not COVID, right? The issue is that Obama cashed out to such a degree that he spends his post-presidency hanging out with celebrities at his $12 million compound in Martha's Vineyard. That's the issue that I have with it, right? I mean, he is the de facto leader of the Democratic Party, which, lest we forget, is a party that is seeing working class voters move away from it in droves of all races and creeds and religions and everything else. And he should be aware of that. But it doesn't seem to bother him much as long as the checks from Netflix and Spotify don't bounce, I guess.
The best part of this story is also who was uninvited from the party. So he had this huge guest list and then had to scale it back, which means you have this awkward conversation of being like, sorry, buddy. So funnily enough, Larry David, who's the king of awkward moments, he was uninvited. David Letterman, Conan O'Brien, those were a couple of the other people who were uninvited. But what does that conversation go like? I can't imagine that Obama's making the call himself, but you're also like, is he genuine? Are these his genuine friends? Or is this just I don't know. At a certain point, like, is he really tight with Beyonce and Jay-Z? Like, those are his
Right.
really
Bradley
good
Cooper?
friends? Or are they just,
Yeah.
you know, they got close because they came? I don't know. I wonder. It's
They're
like,
celebs.
and what is friendship, right? Like, to me, it's like they
Yeah.
define friendship. I don't know.
I just think, I think when people become like rich celebrities, they don't think about things the same way that you and I do. But it is funny that you made that point, right? Because it's like normally if you have to do something like this, you just tell people, oh, Lil, I'm canceling, nobody's coming, don't worry about it. Now it's like you get disinvited and you have to read the New York Post and see like, wait, hold on, I got disinvited, but Bradley Cooper
still got to go,
yeah.
and I got.
What the hell is that? What the heck is that, right?
It's really, I mean, these are the things that COVID. I had to go to a baby shower last night, and I was so nervous. And the weather was supposed to be great, and then all of a sudden we know that the weather turned terrible.
Yeah.
And it was like the weirdest thing. So I had to text the girl who was throwing it to be like, what's your plan? I just want to confirm it's outside. You know, it gets so awkward. And then she was like, yeah, we have a tent, but it's totally going to be a downpour. And it was. We were all sitting there under this small tent, and it was like raining cats and dogs. It was horrible. But, you know, this is the stuff we have to do, I guess, to try and stay safe in COVID.
Yeah.
Okay.
Man.
On that
One
note,
day this will be over.
Okay, that is what you need to know for Monday, August 9th.
Good to have you back, Jill. See you guys mañana.